600 years ago, a German metalsmith took a wine press, added movable type, and invented the printing press. In a sense, Johannes Gutenberg built one form of information transfer out of another. In the growing field of biosemiotics, scientists study how living beings respond to ecological signs, including the plants and animals our food comes from. Smoke is a sign. It indicates fire. A fruit's color indicates ripeness. Our food carries these messages and memories about the organism it came from and the environment it grew in. But messages can become distorted en route. So how do we decode them? I'm Charles Loy. I'm a filmmaker who began to see that the California we grew up in is disappearing. Climate change demands new solutions and new stories. My friends and I set out to find those narratives.
Hey there! If you enjoy our storytelling and want to help us continue doing it, consider making a donation at norcalpublicmedia.org/donate. Thanks!
California is huge in agriculture, the largest producer in the US and number 5 in the world. But agriculture is also our state's 5th largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So we wanted to know, how does this industry giant reduce its climate impacts? We took a trip to UC Davis, where Ermias Kebreab is trying to tackle one slice of the emissions pie.
Methane, although is not as much as carbon dioxide in terms of the amount that's been emitted, is much more potent.
Methane accounts for as much as 40% of global warming. And a lot of that comes from cows, who, contrary to popular belief, release it primarily through burps, not the other way. Ermias and his team are trying to reduce that through cow feed. Part of the inspiration? Seaweed. Studies have shown that seaweed disrupts the microbes inside cows' guts.
The microbes are the ones that are producing the methane. So we provide different type of feed additives, some secondary compounds like tannins that would reduce emissions. And then we have others that are inhibitors that inhibit the methanogenesis or the methane from being formed. The third one that we are about to embark is microbial editing. So if we are able to kind of switch off the genes that are responsible for methane formation, then we may be able to come up with a microbiome or the microbes that do not emit methane. A lot of people are looking into California to see what works and what doesn't work. Definitely there is some overconsumption going on in high-income countries in particular, so we can afford to reduce that. At the same time, we need to supply a large section of the population that demand those products, particularly in low-income countries. You have to make sure that it's safe for the animal, it's safe for the environment, it's safe for people. We all know how dire the situation is, and we don't have a lot of time. And then we come here and we do this experiment, and then we see emission reduction going all the way up to 90–95%. That's very exciting.
Innovative solutions like this one are incredibly important, but they're not the whole enchilada. The industrialization of our food system comes with a ton of other problems, like the question of animal welfare, or pollution from fertilizers and pesticides, or deforestation. But industrialization also feeds a lot of people. So how can we do that while still remembering that the garden you cultivate doesn't end at the fence? More and more farmers are taking this question seriously. And one growing approach is regenerative agriculture. So here in wine country, we met up with Ames Morison to learn more about how one vineyard is doing this.
The sheep are a really integral part of our approach to regenerative farming. The biggest challenge to farming organically is managing the weeds. Sheep are really good at the beginning of the season before the vines start growing. They go through and mow down pretty much all of the grass, all of the weeds. When they're done, we want about 1/3 of the grass to be eaten, 1/3 of the grass to be trampled, and 1/3 of the grass to remain. That allows still plenty of plant matter to continue photosynthesizing, but we're getting rid of a lot of the competition. And as the sheep go through the vineyard, as they're eating the weeds, they're also digesting them and leaving their manure, and the growth is much lusher, much more verdant. In addition to doing that, we have eliminated tillage. You're allowing the organic matter to build up in the soil. And for every 1% organic matter, you allow the soil to hold an additional 25,000 gallons per acre. And so that can go a really long way to eliminating the need for irrigation. And that's a huge advantage here in California, where it doesn't rain in the summer. I grew up on a farm. Farming, it's a tough business, very low margins. And so people are willing to pay more for the chemicals they use to help minimize the risk. But I think they're not seeing the long-term risk of using those chemicals.
Risks like insect die-offs that are driven in part by pesticides, or the emission of nitrous oxide, the third largest driver of global warming. But honestly, we've been so disconnected from food, it's hard to notice. Food used to give us direct information about the ecology, who was flourishing, what to eat, what not. That knowledge shaped our relationships. But industrialization, by prioritizing profit over nutrition, quantity over quality, broke this circle, stretching the distance between every step and inserting corporate players in between. Food messages were distorted by processing and branding. Consumers and farmers lost connection with the local ecosystem, and workers lost their connection to the people they feed. It got harder to feel the effects of poisoned soil or the struggles of farmers and laborers. But with Ames, we began to see it's not just about how agriculture exacerbates or is affected by climate change. It's about how agriculture can be a tool to build climate resilience.
2019, the Kincade Fire swept through here at the end of October. And if you look around and see pretty much everything you can see that's green now was charred black. We lost about 20% of our vines, thousands of trees. It was a wake-up call to re-examine everything we were doing. We've been farming organically for 25 years, but I started to wonder if that was enough. I just kept hearing this word pop up continuously, regenerative. People that farm regeneratively, they have to be very, very observant of the vine. The vines will live longer as a result. And so that extra layer of attention allows us to make better wine.
Food connects us to our changing environment, to our context. Food embodies memory in its chemistry, its flavor, its form. There's this concept that scientists like Jill Johnstone call ecological memory, the idea that past events or disturbances in an ecosystem leave behind legacies. These legacies guide how the ecosystem responds to similar disturbances in the future. Like certain trees, responding to recurring wildfires with cones that only open when exposed to heat, releasing seeds that repopulate the species. Nature learns, but can it learn fast enough?
We have had so many extreme years. 2010 and 11 were some of the coldest years we've ever experienced. 2022, we had a week where the temperature got above 110 every day. And it's very stressful for the vines to handle that weather. 25 years ago, we're in a different climate. We've gotten more than our average rainfall, but one of the challenges is that it used to come sort of spread over the whole winter. Now we're getting very intense events. If you don't have a lot of organic matter in your soil, you can't hold on to all that water, so a lot of it runs off. And as it runs off, it's also creating erosion. Pinot Noir, which is grown not that far from here, is much more heat sensitive, and I think it's going to be harder to grow that variety in the future. Grapes get riper during the harvest season, and it used to be that the amount of sugar is roughly equivalent to the physiological ripeness, or when all the other flavors that make the wine taste good are present. And so that was a very easy tool to measure the sugar in a grape. But as temperatures increase, that relationship between sugar ripeness and physiological ripeness is getting less and less linked. In order to get the flavors we want, we have to harvest at a higher sugar than we want, causing wines to have more alcohol than they used to, and that's a problem as well. Every year is so different because of the weather, and so that has the biggest influence on the flavor of wine from year to year.
Wine is like tasting a memory.
Yeah, each bottle captures almost like a photograph, all the things that happened in that year, just in one sip. There's a whole ecosystem that revolves just around the roots of plants. Fungi burrow into the roots of plants and send out these tubes that help find nutrients and minerals that the plant needs.
Fungi are a kingdom of life that breaks down old structures and weaves together new relationships. This is Taye Bright, a graduate student at California State East Bay and fungi enthusiast.
We know how important trees are for climate modulation and ecosystem health and so many functions and services to the world and to humans. But oftentimes, we don't give a lot of credit to the fungi that make the lives of the trees possible. So just because we can't see the mushroom, which is kind of the above ground reproductive structure of the fungus, it's important to remember that fungi are still everywhere. They're inside of the leaves of all these plants. Their mycelium is in the earth, in the soil. They invite us to get really close to the forest floor. So this is most likely a saprotroph that's breaking down the really hard structure of wood and basically turning it into these little wood particles that will then be eaten further by the life in the soil and reassimilated back into the forest. If you think of food, medicine, or fermentation, fungi have always been a part of human food systems, but they also feed many other beings in the natural world.
Many plants rely on mycorrhizal fungi to gather enough water and nutrients to grow. Many of those nutrients come from a related group of saprotrophic fungi, which break down organic matter so that its nutrients can be reabsorbed into the soil. Fungi are kind of the foundations for ecosystems that we depend on. They're not just fun guys.
This is sorrel?
Yeah. Have you ever nibbled on a piece of redwood sorrel before?
It's nice and sour. Almost like a blueberry.
Yeah. I kind of like to call them nature's Sour Patch Kids. They're fun to just be in that deeper relationship with the forest. They're just right here. So these are Ganoderma brownii, one of our local native reishi species. So this looks like a Melanoleuca species. Very gently, I'm going to unearth the mushroom. You can see that it has a lot of really beautiful, fuzzy white stuff at the base, and that's their mycelium. This is really the true body of the fungus that's growing in the duff and in the soil, and this is what the mushroom that we're holding here comes from. I feel like in a lot of our discussions about climate change, fungi are virtually absent from that conversation. About 3/4 of all terrestrial carbon is stored in the soil. And fungi are a huge player in that stored carbon. I work for the Fungal Diversity Survey, so we're kind of the appendages of researchers that are out in the field making the collection. Fungi require us to slow down and really pay attention to our surroundings, putting our mushroom goggles on, and it kind of forces us to pick up these nuanced patterns in the landscape.
Patterns that industrialization obscures. A closer relationship to the land and our food allows us to remember that everything lives in relation with others. Paying attention, paying care to those relationships is what Cafe Ohlone is all about. The Ohlone people were here in the Bay Area before colonization, and through their cuisine, chefs Vincent Medina and Trevino are making sure we all remember that. They showed us how even the process of making food is itself a way of making meaning of the world.
So these acorns, they have to cure for 6 months. They're a black oak acorn, which we use for acorn soup. These are rare to find because partially of climate change, but we know spaces in our home here to gather them. You're just gonna tap. If there's any of the red that's there, the most bitter part, it's a sign that the acorn isn't done the way that the elders would like it to be done.
It means you were a little bit sloppy. This is very calming.
Oh yeah. We have a very peaceful culture. Imagine people doing this every single day by the creek, just surrounded by their family, living in a world where everybody trusts each other and works together for common goals, a world of abundance. We believe that the plants, and then later the animals, they were in the world first. They have their own personhood. When we're gathering our plants, we always want to say thank you.
How do you square the methods and the ways that you guys make your food with the necessities of modernization?
People aren't eating seasonally, but we also know that there's another way that's there. What's growing at the farmers markets, for an example, that's seasonal food. Foods that are being grown in a sustainable way in springtime now. All of these greens are coming up right here. The rore, the Indian lettuce, the watercress, fiddlehead ferns. When we transition into summer, we're out more and we're more active. Foods that are higher in sugars help us stay energized. Native strawberries that are growing and the juicy blackberries and the hazelnuts that come in. You know, the land is providing for us exactly what we need in the moments. The earth has a way of always taking care of us.
All this talk about food got us hungry. So Vince and Lewis invited us to lunch with their family.
I thought it was fitting that we meet with you while we're eating because food is our love language with our family, certainly.
The colors and the textures of the food reflect the land that we come from right here.
Pretty. It's just so beautiful to look at.
Yeah, we're from paradise, you know?
You guys know Vince when he was younger. What was he like?
He was brat. Very particular, very fussy. And a compliment.
We're so lucky that we have the family that we have because we love each other, but we like each other. Yeah. We hang out together.
Yes. This is very common, sitting around the table. And you never know who's going to walk through the door on any given day.
Where we live and where we're driving around, it's where we belong. It's where we came from. There was never a break in our connection. So it's like, it's heartwarming.
Yeah. How do you say delicious?
We say, porchetta macamba. It's good that we eat. Carson right here, and he's learning some Sorcheño language.
Do you remember the word for salmon?
Team.
Makes you think you're sitting back in time with the elders. During the Depression, we didn't have much, you know. We never thought about that because there was plenty of food, deer, you name it.
Everything you need to live a good life right there.
Speaking of the good life, we wanted to know, what do the people who harvest our food need for a good life?
Me siento bien contenta de ver personas que no son trabajadores del campo, pero nos están apoyando en estos momentos. Estamos aquí el día de hoy para que nos escuchen. Lo único que nosotros estamos pidiendo es pago por desastre y un sueldo digno, y es cosa que lo merecemos.
Eso. Right across the street, there's a party going on, and people are spending thousands of dollars to be there from all over the world. They're drinking wine that has been made off of the backs of farm workers. And so we are calling on the consumers to support and to back up workers.
Muy importante que siempre que nos manifestamos, que nuestra cultura, nuestro amor, nuestras voces, nuestra música, nuestros ritmos sean presentes también, porque esta lucha se basa en dignidad y amor. Often we know people who oppose us, they're still tapping their toes. They still want to dance with us even if they don't agree with what we're doing.
Pago por desastre. Pago por desastre.
Dice que por eso la querían entrevistar, porque la vieron en la marcha y tenía mucha energía, era muy divertida.
Bailando.
Bailando. Oh, es cierto. She started the dance line. Usted comenzó el baile. ¿Se acuerda que usted dijo que nadie estaba bailando?
Luego le invitamos a un party para bailar el burro loco. Al estar en una marcha, para mí, yo me siento bien segura de sí misma, porque yo te siento que alrededor tengo mucha gente que nos está apoyando como trabajadores. Y no solamente a los trabajadores, porque yo me siento como que ese estrés está fuera de mi vida, porque yo simplemente siento esa energía.
¿Puede hablar de su relación con la tierra y su conexión con la naturaleza?
Es algo muy bonito en Oaxaca porque sabemos cuidar la tierra, no se usan los químicos. Allá no se usa nada de químicos como aquí. Yo he trabajado siempre en el campo. Mi trabajo es desde que se planta hasta que se cosecha la uva. Nos tenemos que levantar muy temprano, dejar a nuestros hijos y llegar al campo y estar bajo el sol. Cuando hace calor, pues trabajamos muy poco. Y no nos pagan. Estamos en esa lucha de pago por desastre porque creo que nosotros lo merecemos. Y estamos luchando para que nos paguen como cuando trabajamos muy poquito, como a tiempo de la calor o como cuando hay lluvia, hay fuego. Lo merecemos porque somos los que estamos en el campo y somos los que estamos día a día ahí. Y nosotros ahorita no tenemos suficientemente el trabajo que teníamos antes porque no tienen vendida la uva. Pues yo del 99 cuando llegué teníamos mucho trabajo porque trabajamos 60 horas a la semana y quizás nos pagaba menos, pero no estaba tan caro la comida ni la renta como ahora. El dinero lo tienen. Lo tienen porque ellos tienen viajes, ellos tienen carros nuevos, ellos se pueden ir de vacaciones, pero no quieren pagar más.
I think that we can't have like climate justice without thinking about workers. That's how this fight started to begin with. It started during the fires as all of us were going back into our houses and like not being allowed into evacuation zones. Workers were going into evacuation zones. Cecilia has talked about like leaving her kids behind during the fires to harvest a luxury crop.
Yo no sabía, nunca conocí un grupo como de trabajo con justicia que apoyaban a los trabajadores. Lo que nos están preparando es cómo cuidar la tierra. Tenemos entrenamientos de las motosierras, tener como espacio dependible. Eso, la verdad, a mí me hace feliz porque sé que nos están preparando para un sueldo mejor en el futuro. Pero nosotros vamos a seguir en la lucha, que nosotros estamos luchando por $25 la hora. ¿Quién va a vivir con $17.50 la hora? No sabemos cuándo nos va a llegar lo que nosotros estamos luchando. Esperemos que pronto. Vamos a seguir luchando. A ver cuándo.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
When we decided to follow this regenerative journey, a really big element of it is paying a living wage, which sounds like the lowest bar possible. How could you not pay someone a living wage? They know the vineyard better than I do. They know every little nook and cranny. We have this saying that great wine is made in the vineyard. If we really believe that, then we need to treat our vineyard workers with the same respect that we treat our winemakers, because they are the winemakers.
One more question. What's it really like working with Ohlone?
¿Qué realmente es trabajar conmigo? Feo.
Para estar con personas de la comunidad hay que tener mucha paciencia, mucha calma. Ella tiene mucha paciencia y me ha enseñado mucho para ser mejor persona, mejor madre y mejor persona para la comunidad.
I've just learned a lot about how she like builds trust with people and how she like builds relationships and they like want to follow her.
Hay mucha gente que todavía tiene miedo a levantar la voz. Entonces yo estoy aquí para hablar porque yo no tengo miedo.
Through food, you experience the embodied record of this place, of its inhabitants, indigenous, immigrants, in between.
This is a black walnut, candy cap mushroom, olive oil cake. And it comes from a love story of my great-great-great-grandparents. He was a cabin boy, originally from Sicily. Him and my great-great-great-grandmother fell in love. Through love and through family, they would exchange culture. The original recipe comes from Sicily as the olive oil cake. But then our family Ohlone-ized it. I brought in Ohlone flavors, black walnuts native here to California, candy cap mushrooms, these fragrant, aromatic, sweet mushrooms. And it's delicious. But it's coming from a love story. Specific people from right here where we're sitting, no time before. We think about their love and who allows us to be here in the world today.
And Taye, how do you feel about what Louis and Vince have created?
They have done so much work in our culture, bringing it back to life. Oh, God, I'm so proud of them.
Nature's always written to us, whether it's encapsulated in a bottle or a bite.
What might we remember if we paid attention? What might those messages tell us? You are not a machine. You are not a number. You are alive, and so are we. Every cut of meat, every drink of milk, every seed and leaf is a transfer of power. Remember, when you receive our life, you are making our potential yours. Reciprocity means returning a fair share of it back to the harvesters of light and land. Our world and yours is changing. We are giving you life. What will you do with it?
To learn more, you can explore our other episodes and resources on pbs.org and the PBS app. Just search Climate California or go directly to climatecalifornia.org. Climate California is brought to you in part by Crankstart, a San Francisco-based family foundation that works with others on critical issues concerning economic mobility, education, and the environment. And by donors to the NorCal Public Media Center for Environmental Reporting, including Jay Longfellow through the estate of Claire Etienne, Margaret McCarthy, and Stephen L. Smith.